fireside chat will be with Sarah Clarke, EVP, North America Supply at PVH. Thank you for joining us, Sarah, and we'll turn the conversation over to Deborah and Sarah.
Thank you so much, Max. Sarah, when we were last in Washington together for the AFA Executive Summit, there was a significant and impressive focus on ESG for the industry. Can you talk about what PVH is doing in this area and what's happened since last March?
Gosh. Wow, what a year we've all navigated. First of all, I think that the last year has brought to the forefront so many things, just the pandemic, the impacts globally of that, and just watching that resurgence across different countries and how people are navigating that and how we've had to navigate it with our supply partners as well as our retail partners, because it's obviously hitting everyone across the value chain, as well as our consumers and our associates, etc. And so how do you navigate that? Layered on top of that, we've had government action, especially Brexit, and then we've got also close eyes on that, and then also obviously the US government legislative and regulatory actions as it pertains to XJ province in China. So layering on that, and then the social injustice actions that we saw come to the fore last year as well. So I think just those three examples show you how we as a large house of brands operating in 190, I lose track, but over 190 countries now, with a large presence in China, a large presence in Europe, a large presence in America and other places, is how we have to think of that as we buy, deliver, ship product, talk to our consumer, deliver value for our shareholders, and think about how we operate with purpose going forward, and keeping, what's very, very important, Deborah, and I'm a big believer in this, and those that know me that I'm sure are listening, is it's very, very important in how we do business. And I love that there's such a focus on ESG, and just for us, it's very top of mind, and working with suppliers and retailers that have shared values, because when you navigate something to the extreme, as we all did last year, and we continue to navigate it, it's how everyone comes together and tries to deal with those social, economic, political issues in a way that is hopefully putting a better solution out there for everybody. So a bit of a general response to that, but it was a big question, Deborah. I think we're going to hear more and more on this topic throughout the year.
Well, it was interesting because at the beginning of 20, right, it was this idea around kind of sustainability for sustainability's sake. Yeah. And as we move through 20, it was sustainability for profitability's sake. And so I think that, you mentioned it, right, kind of working together and partnering, right, on many different topics. We found that there are ways to kind of do good and do good, right? I mean, do the right thing and then ultimately have an impact on the bottom line.
100%. I mean, there's a lot of research out there that shows that the top companies that really do believe in this and operate this way, and it's fundamental to their culture and how they think through a sustainable business model, that they are the ones that win and they create the shareholder value. So I think on so many levels, the traceability and transparency is a great example. I think if we talked about that pre-pandemic, there were some companies that were further on than others, especially in our sector in retail and apparel. But was it really, integral to the way that they needed to operate for all the right reasons? Or was it a sustainability, corporate responsibility, great to have, we're doing the right thing? I think that is an agenda that has completely shifted. And the emphasis and the need for it and the realization, I'm sure it's coming to the top of most people's priorities. Again, definitely in the apparel and retail sector, really having to understand all the way through our supply chains, which are extremely complex and being proven through the pandemic to be very fractured. It is not easy. I like cotton. I always like to give an example of making an omelette, Deborah. Once you take different fibers and you spin cotton and you're making it a certain staple length and a certain quality, and that cotton can come from it's a bit like making an omelette. You take 7 eggs, you make an omelette, and then you say, excuse me, can you tell me where each of those eggs came from? Which part of my omelette? So it is complex, and I don't want to simplify it, but to your point, I think we had focused on human rights as an industry for a very long time. And that, to me, the ship has sailed if people don't understand the impacts of focusing on that and the ripples of wins that come from quality, efficiency, better product, happier workers. That to me has happened. But I think the approach is now much broader. It's a much broader remit across so many different disciplines of our industry now. It's, yeah, to your point, it's integral to what we do.
You talked about the complexity and the fracturing. Are you seeing things become simpler, and what's happening in terms of, you know, shortening lead times and just really kind of simplifying the entire business model?
I think we always strive as supply chain leaders, first of all, if you don't love complexity and you don't love solutions and building things, then maybe supply chain right now is not the career, because I think it's one of the most exciting disciplines you could possibly be in today. And I think more and more supply chain is not just a competitive advantage, it's an imperative to focus and invest, just like risk management today, I think will be a much bigger focus maybe than for more people than in the past. I would say it's our job as leaders to try and simplify as we move forward and create capability and operating efficiencies and practices. I would say we live in a more complex era than ever. We had a long-term strategy at PVH. We talk about low and fast, near and high, and then express models. And we wanted to work best, you know, want to work best in class suppliers, less suppliers, to create those capabilities. Now you've got to have local for local. We have to figure out fractured supply chains. During the pandemic, we all got caught with inventory all over the world, and raw material suppliers were down in China, but you know, manufacturers were manufacturing in other countries of origin. And so you had this lack of synchronization that we're seeing. We're seeing it with demand and supply. You know, Europe's facing heavy closures, store closures again, and yet in other countries of origin, they're back up and running. So I think that thinking through globalization, regionalization, local for local, and having a network and a more dynamic approach to solutions is essential. Like we are, I don't know how long we will be called supply chain leaders for, because it feels like a very old term. It's no longer, you know, links in a chain and linear. It's a messy network, and you've got to think through all these different solutions, because the consumer, even as we saw through the pandemic, switching to digital, still expects their product very fast, in the right place, when they want it, and at the right value proposition and quality. So I would say we strive for simple, but the complexity is greater than ever.
Well, and I think that, you know, with PVH, the sole representative of the apparel and retail industry at today's event, you know, with great brands like Tommy and Calvin, what additional challenges did that place on you in the past year?
So, you know, what many people listening might not know, but PVH as a house of brands, our largest global brands are indeed Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. But we also have brands such as, we have underwear brands such as Warner's and Olga. We do Nike men's underwear. We have Van Heusen. So we are very complex in that we have national brands, we have global brands, we operate out of different countries. We have different retailers, wholesale. We have our own direct-to-consumer stores as well as .com. So what we've had to navigate is some of our brands that we sold in big box retailers, for example, like Costco or Target or Walmart, they were rocking and rolling during the pandemic. So then you're dealing with how are you feeding goods when you've got factory closures. So again, it's that synchronization. And just making sure you have the right inventory in the right place at the right time. And then our other brands trying to figure out how do we be able to get product to the consumer with that shift to digital and open up other ways, other methods of fulfillment we didn't do before. So for example, you know, in Europe, the Tommy Hilfiger stores, we figured out how we could feed product to our platform partners like a Zalando, for example, and feed product to them, fulfilling from stores. We hadn't done that before. So So, you know, we're figuring out as we go, and we're learning along the way. But we have to be very tailored, take learnings, and pretty decentralized approach so that we can be reactive to what the brands and that local consumer and our local retail partners require of us. So it takes it, you know, all the words, the buzzwords we're hearing around pivoting, agility, digital is critical. So yeah, if that answers your question, Deborah.
Well, taking all those kind of words and thinking about, you know, early on, right? Buying trips were canceled. Designers are literally designing from home. How did that kind of expedite the digitization or digitalization of the supply chain? And where are we now, and where do you see us going?
I love that you asked that, because I'm smiling. You know, some agendas you find that supply chain leaders are pushing. And I think shifting to digital product development, as we call it, digital go-to-market, was something we were advocating for with our technology group. We have the tools, our supply chain partners, extremely capable of it. But it was more of a push, and people still wanted to feel the fabric, which I understand, right? You want to feel the fabric. Pandemic hit, everyone's working from home. Digital was top of everyone's mind. Our retail partners were really open to it. Our design teams figured out how to work with it, and people started to adjust. So honestly, a huge acceleration, which for me, is fantastic, because it's something that we needed to move faster on. So I'd say the adapting to digital go-to-market has been critical to being able to continue our business from a business continuity perspective. But it's also a huge enabler, as we want to do local for local, to take out inefficiencies in the supply chain from a sustainability perspective. So again, it's enabling a strategy we had pre-COVID, but it's really accelerated it, which is fantastic to see.
So the consumer has also changed, right? How they shop digitally, you know, as was highlighted on your most recent earnings call with, you know, just the growth in, you know, e-commerce and whatnot. How has the consumer journey changed? And then what are the implications in the near term and long term for the supply chain?
Well, I think that the great title of this event, I think it's all about, you know, starting with the consumer and understanding the consumer and tracking the consumer and figuring out where do they want to shop, and how do they want to shop, and what are they expecting of brands. And I would say that there isn't one answer fits all. So again, it's about that dynamic solutioning. But it seems so far that most customers are voting for ship to my home, for example, but they want it immediately. So we've got to create. A lot of people are looking at local for local at an inventory level today, because in our space, that's easier. If you're looking at North America as a market, shifting to local inventory is probably an easy way to try and do it. So what are your high velocity SKUs? Do you create these micro hubs close to, you know, larger markets? But at the backbone of that, which is why I also love that you have Blue Yonder agenda today on the slate, is the backbone of all of this is end-to-end planning, digital planning, that visibility, that data, getting into predictive analytics. You've got to understand, it's not easy to say, well, it is easy to say, you just got to have the right product at the right time. It's local for local. But when you really get into it, it's like, well, how do I know what they want? How do I know when they're going to shop? And we have SKU intensive businesses, denim, bras, shirts, etc., where you have to hold a lot of inventory. So I would say there's a lot of complexity to work through, and the consumer wants to work in all different ways and maybe go to a supermarket and start to be able to pick up product that they've ordered from a high-end brand, because that's where they're going to go to do their shop. So we're learning all the time, Deborah. I think it's an ever-evolving marketplace. It's getting expensive for everybody to try and figure this out, because logistics is high in demand right now. So all of these customized approaches to getting that consumer sale and that consumer satisfaction and loyalty is tough, but we'll all figure it out, hopefully together.
Well, and also to your point, right, with typical supply chains, right, designed for big buys, what needs to change to adjust for smaller order quantities or more of a C2M approach?
Yeah, I'm curious to see from a consumer perspective and the sustainability agenda, do people start to buy less? Been a lot of conversations around sort of fast fashion and does that sort of trend die away and people want to buy more sustainably built product, but maybe less of it, and move to that circularity, which we all hope that they will. But I think if we can move to, I think the days ideally would be gone of these massive batch orders, and it's much more of a pull model in terms of you understand what the consumer is voting for and then you make it, right? So, but everyone's on that. I think, I'm not saying anything that people don't know. Everyone's on that journey to try and figure out on-demand manufacturing, maybe small micro parks. But I don't think it's one solution. I think it's multiple solutions, and you've got to figure out what the consumer wants. But what we are clear on is they want it pretty fast, and they want it hopefully sustainably made in the future. And they want the quality and the brands that they believe, to your earlier point, I think work with great purpose and that they can feel good about.
I'm going to close it out with, we've had many questions come in from the audience, which I appreciate. Just use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. And so Chelsea asked this question: how do you see sustainability creating new business models?
Oh, such a great question. I could spend hours with you on that one. I think one of the biggest is the small base, but I think it's like 4,000. I don't even want to quote a percentage increase, but the resale market has grown exponentially. So I think there are many different markets, and that's what's difficult about figuring out how to build for the future when you want to build local for local, which really isn't fully grown yet in the US. There's a lot of work to do there, but trying to build for those new models, I think, is what people are trying to figure out. Buyback, designing for circularity, recycle. So it's going to be a huge focus on how we build for tomorrow. So absolutely, sustainability, I believe, is at the core of everything that we've got to figure out go forward from a supply chain perspective. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. We really enjoyed your insights and comments, and look forward to talking to you soon. And Max, back to you.